What's hot at this year's giant CES Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas? Vertical Hold is proudly sponsored by Casa Systems, taking Australian technology to the global market. Welcome to Vertical Hold, behind the tech news, where we talk to Australia's leading technology journalists to get the stories behind the news of the week. I'm Adam Turner, and this week I'm not joined by Alex Kidman, a man who is currently wandering the streets of Chiba City in search of cheap retro games and a fresh set of ocular implants. Neither Alex nor I have made the pilgrimage this year to the giant Consumer Electronics Show, so we're firing up the Vertical Hold satellite and crossing live to Vegas to chat with longtime friend of the show and one of my fellow tech writers at the Sydney Morning Herald, Peter Wells. Peter, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, Adam.
How goes it in Vegas?
It is the very last day of a very long week, so I'm ready to come home.
Yes, Vegas is best had in small doses, is my opinion, and then you get the hell out of there.
Absolutely.
So what has grabbed your eye? It's been a big week at CES. I understand that TVs, I know they're always a centerpiece. What grabbed your eye in terms of TVs?
Yeah, TVs always dominate the floor space of CES, but this year I wouldn't say that there was anything that really grabbed the attention from the TVs. And so, LG and Samsung had these gigantic booths as they always do. So did Sony, but there was nothing really like. It feels like we're right on the kind of the upward slant of one of our kind of transitions into a new format. So, of course, the big story this year was 8K. But just like 4K before it and 1080p before it, it's very expensive right now. It's not really something that an average consumer could walk into a Harvey Norman and get a 8K television next week. They are very, very expensive. Yeah. So they're good to look at. They're good to see what the future is. But it's one of those. It's kind of one of those off years where we're seeing technology that no one's going to go out and buy.
Yeah. Was there any talk of 8K content? Because I do remember going to CES where they're showing off 4K TVs and then very quietly you'd have a chat behind the scenes with someone from Netflix or something like that. And they were talking about how the 4K content was coming to underpin this. Are you getting any signs that there is 8K content on the way to actually make it, let you get the most from one of these TVs?
Not really. Netflix wasn't here. So I did try to speak to some of the other streaming services. Amazon was here, but yeah, they didn't really seem to be on board. There was some talk. Some of the different TV manufacturers would talk about compression engines that they were building into their TV that they were going to hopefully license to the streamers. But for me, that sounds pretty far-fetched. I think most of the streamers will either settle on one kind of industry standard rather than choosing to decode their stuff for different television makers. But anyway, we'll see how it all shakes out. They did, it showed that there was no real kind of 8K content out there in the sense that they were talking about ways to get around how bad the network would be to deliver 8K and also how they constantly talked about, well, of course, there's no 8K movies out right now, but the PlayStation 5 is around the corner and the Xbox is around the corner. So we think that that will be the thing that drives 8K adoption.
Yeah, the same way that the 4K consoles helped drive 4K adoption as well. I think there's talk of 8K broadcast from the Tokyo Olympics, obviously not in Australia, but maybe in Tokyo. Did the Olympics come up at all as an example of people trying to spruik why you might actually need an 8K TV?
No, actually, I didn't see that mentioned at all. So yeah, that was a missed opportunity there. The other thing they always talked about, it's funny when you find, you go to 5 or 6 different booth tours and you hear the exact same talking points from each different company. And this year, the big trend I would say from TVs, because they didn't really have anything else, I guess to show off, they're all talking about how their new TVs are so much smarter in detecting what is the image on the screen and then being able to, change on the fly to sports mode or to TV mode or to movie mode or whatever, which is, a nice feature. Like they all said the exact same talking points as well of like, you tech nerds out there, you would be flipping these switches, but the majority of our customers don't, and so we're going to make it easier for them to enjoy the content in the best possible way. So yeah, they all talk that same kind of talk about AI improving what kind of content that you're watching.
Yeah, I remember LG was talking a lot about that last year. And the thing is with those kind of video enhancements, more often than not, you're better off turning them off if you know what
Mm,
you're doing, because what you getting the settings that you want and sticking with that are usually better. But LG was using AI to help with the upscaling, which I think makes a lot of sense, because the problem with 8K is anything that's not 8K is maybe going to look a bit shabby, and anything that's standard def is maybe going to look appalling. So your upscaling
yeah.
technology actually becomes more important than ever.
Absolutely, and yeah, they all talked about their upscaling engines. It's very hard to
Yeah.
tell who won that game, just because there's a good half a kilometer between each booth, so you kind of forget how good one looked before you get to the next one. But I will
Yeah.
say the big surprise for me in TVs was Hisense. I thought that they had a really interesting television there. Their ULED XD, I think they call it, which is a dual panel display. So there's a monochrome display behind a full color display. And
Yeah.
so the monochrome display blocks out any of the kind of light bleed that you would normally get from the back LEDs. And the effect was really, really good. Like if you had a discerning eye, you could see that it was just under OLED, but it was way
Yeah.
better than LCD. And so, yeah, I was very impressed by that. And they wouldn't give me any kind of even a price range. But if they can get
That's a
something,
bad sign. That's
well,
a
I
bad
know.
sign.
I know, but I think if they can get something that is like above LCD while still being very, very below OLED, I think that would be a really interesting product.
The problem that they have is OLED's getting more and more affordable, because particularly because LG is the big panel maker for OLED, and they've got so good at it that they've brought down the prices. So if you're paying as much as you would pay for OLED, that's something that's almost as good as OLED, you've got to question why you're just buying OLED. So it was much
Mm.
easier when OLED was north of 10 grand, but now that it's south of five, even less than that, it's much harder to justify why would I want to get something that's not OLED.
Oh,
Was there
totally.
much talk about micro LED?
There were a couple of displays out there on micro LED, but they were generally the ones, they were generally the far out concepts. This is nothing
Yeah,
you're going to see in a department store in the next year. It was all the kind of Samsung call it the wall, which is their gigantic a TV panel system that can kind of plug into itself. And yeah, it was all micro LED was all there on the very high end, very kind of cutting edge. You'll never see this ship as a product in the next few years.
mm. Well, so, and for those who are playing along at home, micro LED is actually marries the best of the both worlds between OLED and LED, because the idea with micro LED is that um, every pixel lights up for itself and there is no backlight, a bit similar to OLED, but it solves the brightness problem that you can sometimes have with OLED. So you can get the brightness of LED backlit televisions, but the contrast and the blacks of OLED. So in
Mm,
theory,
mm,
it's kind of like the perfect screen. But as you say, it's going to be expensive, and it's not just can they get it to work, but can they get it to work on scale? And it's all about manufacturing. Like I said, that's what LG managed to get right, which is why any OLED television that you buy, LG made the panel. Doesn't matter what brand is written on it, LG made the panel, because they're the ones who figured out how to make them at scale and actually get good results from it. So that will be the next challenge with micro LED is, can you make them at an affordable price and get, a good enough yield per batch that it's actually economically viable to do it en masse. And so it'll be interesting to see who tackles that problem. But you'll never see a Samsung OLED, because Samsung will never buy an OLED panel from LG, because Samsung and LG hate each other's guts so much. I mean, you
mm,
think there's a thing between Melbourne and Sydney, right? That's nothing compared to Samsung and LG. So they will, if anyone will be pushing it, it'll be Samsung, because they're the ones who don't want to go down the OLED path,
mm, mm.
but are determined to beat OLED in terms of picture quality. And their earlier ridiculous claims that their side lit QLED was as good as OLED was just embarrassing, really. But they are getting to the point now where they're getting closer. So I'll be interested to see if they want to push it.
Yeah, and Samsung also, like LG, have a really great business to business market as well of selling panels to other
Yeah.
companies. So yeah, so it is in their best interest to crack that.
So moving on from the TV hall, I would think it'd be another big year for 5G at CES. I know this stuff sometimes comes more out of your Mobile World Congresses and stuff like
Mhm.
that, but what would they have on show at CES in terms of mobile and 5G?
Yeah, 5G, again, it's kind of like the 8K TVs where it was everywhere, but you couldn't buy any of it. So
Yeah,
it was definitely in all of the halls, and everyone from a fridge maker to a drone maker had a concept car in their booth, which was very strange. And the whole thing was all about how our smart cities and our smart cars and our all of that stuff is only possibly powered by 5G. Because of the high bandwidth and the low power that it brings. So yeah, it was all again a bit kind of wait and see when it came to 5G, but there was a lot of really cool, interesting stuff on display, and that's kind of why you go to CES anyway. There are some years where you get to see stuff that is going to be out in 3 months, and there are some years where you're looking into the future. And so for me,
mm.
5G this year, it was once again, it was everywhere. It was in every smart car, but yeah, I feel it's a little bit far away.
There's always your novelty stuff. I bet money that there was a 5G enabled toothbrush in there somewhere. What did you see that from 5G that actually seemed the most practical and reasonable? And it's like, yeah, actually, that would make sense.
It was all in the car tech. So all of the stuff about cars
Yeah,
being able to talk to each other, to in real time. I mean, right now, we see a glimpse of the kind of power of crowds when you're driving around. If you use something like Waze or Google Maps that can kind of push you in a different direction if they can see a traffic jam up ahead. When all of our cars can do that and talk to each other, that becomes really important and really a much bigger uh, benefit. So yeah,
yeah,
that's a lot of the stuff they were talking about with 5G, but it was also things like your devices that might live in your home might connect to 5G over Wi-Fi instead. So you would still have a standard kind of internet connection at home, but then you would have these little things that were little kind of gadgets that would speak outside of your network just for security reasons and to be able to speak at longer distance at a lower power. So like little
yeah.
battery operated kind of switches and things in your house.
It's also about latency as well. That's one of the big things about 5G with talking to between cars and stuff like that, and even a little bit of IoT around your home is that it's not just it's faster, but there's less of a lag when you want to send a message and wait for a response. So that helps with a bit more of the real time stuff.
Absolutely. I'm sure if you've got a smart speaker at home, you've had that weird moment where you've wondered, did it hear me or am I just? Oh no, there it goes.
Yeah, there it goes. Yeah, wake up. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
So they always trot out your VR headsets and maybe your AR headsets. I think VR's maybe almost old news in some way. I've always thought that
Mm.
AR, so augmented reality, has a bit more potential. So VR's, you can't see the real world at all. It's all on a screen in front of you. AR is like stuff superimposed over your view of the real world. But I got the impression you weren't impressed with everything that you saw.
Maybe I'm just old and grumpy these days, but
Yeah, you fit well on this podcast. You really do.
well, the VR stuff, yeah, the VR stuff actually, it felt like it had finally come to whatever it was going to eventually be. Like there was even a
Yeah,
military grade VR that was incredibly high level, and that was being used for pilots. So you had to kind of book in to go see that one. But yeah,
yeah,
VR really feels like it's a mature product now for the people who want VR. I'm not one of them, but for the people who dig it, I'm glad that they're happy. But AR, oh my gosh, it has a long way to go. Like having a look at some of the glasses that were around the hall, you could. I mean, first of all, you can tell when a technology has still got a couple of years left in the oven when you only see it in the South Hall. So for people who have
yeah.
never been to CES, the South Hall is kind of where all of the tiny little no-name brands you've never heard of live. The middle hall is where your bigger Sony.
It's like off Broadway.
Exactly. And so,
Yeah,
and it's great. It's so much fun to be in because that's where you get to see the trends kind of emerging. But yeah, some of those AR glasses were just so so every pair was so uncomfortable, and it would take 5 minutes for the lovely person behind the booth to explain that I was looking the wrong way, or like one set of glasses you kind of had to look up a little bit and squint, and then another like
yeah.
as if anyone is going to do this in their day to day life. So yeah, AR seemed a little bit of a just it needs a little while. I'd give it a
Yeah.
little longer.
The best AR headset that I would have worn would be the Microsoft HoloLens AR. And I think they're up to the second generation now. And I've looked at both, and I could see the improvement with the second one in terms of that field of vision. Because as you say, with the first one, that it was a very narrow. You got to get it to sit just right on your nose and look at it just the right way to see through that tiny little square that's superimposing things over the world. And that's kind of getting better. The Lenovo ones I tried weren't too bad. You were playing Jedi lightsaber fights and stuff like
Hmm.
that. But I've tried some really cheap and nasty ones. I think at was it in Shanghai? Was CES Shanghai? I think a couple of years ago. There's some really cheap and nasty ones that are just kind of being cobbled together. And as you say, they're given the concept of AR a bad name because I've seen some really nice AR, but I think it's that form factor they've still got to get right.
Yeah, the one that really impressed me, I think it came from Brother of all places, the printer maker people. But yeah, they had a really great one that was specifically designed for enterprise. But yeah, one of the ones I tried in the South Hall today, I literally had to sit down for a few minutes afterwards because my eyes hurt so much, and I'd only worn it for about 20 seconds.
Yeah.
So yeah, a little way to go for that one.
Yeah, I think it's going to really be the business applications because you can see if you're a mechanic, for example, and you're trying to repair an engine and you can call up the schematics on top of what you're looking at and you need a part number and bang, there it is. Like that, those kind of applications make a lot of sense and you can really see all kinds of business applications for that. But as a consumer application, just like VR, it kind of struggles to find that sweet spot of why would I spend
Mm.
the money and muck around with this, especially like the VR headsets. We've been through a few generations now, so they're a little bit more stable. But AR, yeah, maybe got to go back to the drawing board. Sleep tech was another one that you had on your list. Sounds like you needed a bit of a lie down after AR. How did the sleep tech impress you? Did you? Because I've almost engaged the sleep tech without even trying. I remember the last day of CES, standing in the Belkin booth talking to David Wolf, and I was literally swaying back and forwards on my feet. And he's like, "Mate, you need to take your bag off and sit down, and you're going to collapse." So I do know how hard one works at CES. Did the sleep tech come to the rescue?
Well, not for me, not for me in the day. But there was some interesting stuff that I saw. So the Sands is another gigantic conference center at CES, and that this year was all about health and wearables,
Yeah,
and so that was a lot of fun. I went down there. There were quite a few, that. I'm sure Sleep Tech made a lot of those classic kind of like the weird and wackiest things you saw at CES lists that a lot of people are
yeah,
fond of writing. There were silly things that you would strap to your head, and there were things that you would strap around your waist, and all of these kind of things that like just look so ridiculous and feel so uncomfortable that how they're supposed to help you then fall asleep is beyond me. But the one that I saw that was really fantastic was Linksys of all people, who make routers and modems and things like
yeah.
that. They had created a couple of little things that almost look like just tiny little white coasters, and you put them in your bedroom, and they then just detect motion, but they do it in a really subtle way. So they're not looking for you getting up and going to the toilet. They're looking for you kind of tossing and turning in bed. And the clever thing about it was, it was they said they created this for all of those reasons that. If you want to track sleep, especially if you've got a reason to, if you've got reason to be worried about sleep apnea or something like that, then you want to be able to track your sleep, but you
Yeah.
don't want to be able to wear something. You don't want to have to wear something to do it, and you also, especially, do not want a camera pointed at your bed. Most people, at least most of the time, don't want a camera pointed at their bedroom, and so that's why they came up with this device that was something that you didn't have to wear, but was also very very privacy conscious. And I thought that was a really clever idea, and they'd been already kind of working on that motion detecting stuff for some of their smart home things. So it was just a clever, when speaking to one of the guys at the booth, so I was just saying, look, yeah, it was just one of those things that it was a side project that someone thought of using our existing technology. Turns out it worked really well. So I love those little stories. So yeah, hats off to Linksys.
Yeah, that kind of technology's been around for a while on smartphones, but it's relied more on sound than vision and detecting motion. There's an app I've got on my iPhone called Sleep Cycle that you sit it next to the bed and it basically listens to the movement while you're sleeping. And then when you look in the morning, you can see how it's charted you go through your cycles and you come back up and then you go down into a deep sleep again. And
Mm.
it does a reasonable job of detecting the quality of sleep you've got. And one of the reasons why it does that is because it tries to wake you up in the morning when you're at the top of one of those cycles rather than the bottom. So instead of saying wake me up at 8:30, you say wake me up in some time in the 15 or 20 minutes before 8:30. And then if you're like, at the top of the sleep cycle at 8:20, it's like, well, I'm going to wake you up now rather than give you 10 minutes to plunge down into that deep sleep. Because when you get woken from that deep sleep, you feel like crap. So you actually wake feeling more
Mm.
refreshed, even if you maybe got 10 minutes less sleep. But it
Yeah.
can be a bit laughable. My wife uses it as well sometimes, and the two phones can actually detect that they're on the same network. And I think they do a little bit of like noise cancelling to try and separate her from me. But there are times when you have a terrible night's sleep and it tells you you've had 100% and you almost smash your phone against the wall. So
Yeah.
there is some work to be done, and I would be interested to see, because this one, if you're having trouble getting to sleep, but you're not wrestling around too much, it can kind of think, oh, maybe you did settle down. So I'd be interested to see if the motion one can actually be a bit more accurate than just the
Yeah.
sound one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know. They seem to be thinking of, they were taking temperature and breathing and a whole bunch of stuff. So yeah, it seemed they really thought this one through.
Yeah, I think if you combined the motion and the sound together, that would give you two things to cross reference, and you probably get more accurate results that way. So, what about before one goes to sleep? I understand there's a little bit of sexy tech, perhaps I'm not sure if that's the word for it, but there's
Uh,
always some weird and wonderful things on show at
well,
CES.
well, yeah, there was actually a bit of a controversy last year where one of the winners of an innovation award at CES was for a vibrator, and then the innovation award was taken away when
That's right,
CES.
yeah.
Yeah, they kind of freaked out and became all
Rubbed them
puritanical
the
about
wrong
the whole
way.
thing. Yes. So in response to that, they actually opened up a small section of the health room to be dedicated to sex tech, and it was
Yeah,
fantastic. It was such a like it was a fun little, part of the hall to be in. Everyone was in a really good mood. Everyone was happy to be in that, like to be allowed back in to show their stuff. And I don't know, I
yeah,
found it really, really great. If you look, obviously, there's not a lot of the products that were on show that either A, I was in the demographic for, or B, really could test on the show floor. So I can't really respond about the quality of the products all that much. But if you are interested in reading a bit more of this, I think Lauren Good from Wired did a fantastic article where she interviewed a bunch of the women behind some of these companies
yeah.
and how they fought to get back into CES. So if you haven't read that yet, go check that out. That's a really great article.
I would think one of the problems with this kind of tech now is once you combine it with things like IoT and analytics and stuff, it can become a big privacy issue, just like any other health data. You may be sharing more about yourself, and people
Mm.
can join the dots and figure out more things about you than you might want them to. Did you see anything that addressed that? Was there talk of, using, we'll say, like Siri tends to keep data on the device rather than in the
Hmm.
cloud? Was there sort of talk of that privacy angle?
There was, yeah. So some places, some of the vendors, sorry, were really insistent and proud on the fact that their devices did not talk to anything networked at all. They were
Yeah.
very Battlestar Galactica in that way. They weren't going to,
You can
and
come
so
back. That's a
yeah.
great reference. You're always welcome on this podcast.
Well, thank you. But yeah. So they just really made a strong point of this is your data. We will never see it. It's never even
Yeah,
leaving the house.
yeah,
There were other services that, for instance, you could remote control a toy connected to your partner, and they did have more of a chat and an app kind of thing based into it. But
yeah.
yeah, whenever networking was involved, they were very strong to again say that your privacy mattered. I don't know whether I would personally want to use a networked toy in that way, but yeah, I'd probably, if I was in the market, I'd probably be looking at the stuff that is air gapped.
Yes, very much so. So you're talking about cars before. The car hall is always massive at
Hmm.
CES, and originally it would be an area where I wouldn't spend that much time because I don't really write about cars, and CES is just too big to see everything. So it's like, yeah, okay, I'll just wander through the car hall and keep going. But it's becoming a lot more relevant to everything else that's happening in tech, especially with things like IoT and 5G. autonomous driving. Did you see anything sort of new in the car hall? Is it just sort of honing what we've already been talking about? What impressed you?
Hmm. So the two big things, I guess there were three big things. So first of all, there was James Cameron's car that was based on Avatar, which is just a concept
I
car,
was
but
going to say,
it
was it
was
big and blue by any chance?
it was big and blue, and it had scales on the back. And I don't know if you like charged it by like rubbing it against a tree or something, but it was all very. It was strange. It was a weird looking thing. It didn't even have a steering wheel. So this is not a car you're going to see on the roads anytime soon. Then there were two really gigantic drones that hung from the ceiling. So one was Hyundai's, and they've said that they're going to make at least 300 of them in the next kind of year or so, and begin testing flying with them. And they've partnered up with Uber to help their idea of Uber Elevate. So that actually seems like, it's one of the few times where it seems like there's an actual product kind of eventuating from this. But then there was also this gigantic bus style drone as well. That was pretty amazing. Beyond that, it was all just like refinements to LiDAR, which is the technology that kind of tells a car where it is on the road and helps it
Yeah.
navigate. Um, and yeah, things like that. There were making me happy. There were just hundreds and hundreds of e-bikes and e-scooters everywhere. So I want to see more of that on the roads. I'd like to see more of our streets given to bike riders
Yeah.
in our towns.
I want to ask you about the scooters, so remember, I'll come back to that. But you said Uber Elevate. Can you talk us through what that is?
Yeah, so Uber Elevate, sometimes it's called Uber Air. They got to work out that branding because it's very annoying. It's a system that they're trialing in three different cities to basically the beginning idea is to go from the CBD of whatever city they're in straight to the airport and just do round trips constantly as a kind of Uber pool but in the sky. And I don't know, I thought that they were really interesting in the way that they talked about the only way that a service like Uber Air, an air taxi could work and actually be affordable was if everyone kind of shared the ride. And the only way that could work is if you already knew kind of who was coming where from the car service. So yeah, I think they told a pretty compelling story about why. Up until now, I kind of thought that Uber Air / Elevate was a little bit of a PR stunt just to kind of I don't know, distract people from some of the other stuff that Uber has been up to in its past. But yeah, they really did seem to have a kind of a proper plan of and spoke about the why Melbourne was one of their key cities. So one of three launch cities that they're targeting. Um,
Seriously, they are insane. There's no way that will work here. Look
why
at
do
the
you say that?
fight that they've Look at the fight that they've had for years about running a train out to the airport. And that fight
Mm,
has been with the owners of the freeways and with the taxi services because they don't want the competition. And
mm.
then let's not even talk about the challenges of flying to the airport that you're not supposed to fly around. But just, yeah, the shit fight that they will have in Melbourne with all the other ways. And we're talking about building a train to the airport now. I think that's built into the contracts of the freeways that they even get compensated if you build other ways to get to the airport. So that will be an absolute nightmare. I was about to say there's no way they'd try that in Melbourne. I was really surprised that you actually said Melbourne was that's going to be a hell of a disruptor.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know. Like, I'm surprised as anyone, and
Yeah.
honestly, I'm still not 100% sure this is even a real product. But like, I can't help it.
It's
I've
never
been to.
stopped them before. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, the way that they described it, it's less than 20 k's from the CBD to the airport. It's can connect onto one of the busiest routes in the world, the Sydney to Melbourne route, and so they do think that for those reasons, it could be a very compelling case for business people who fly very often. But who
Yeah.
knows? Who knows?
The other thing is that you've got to fly over Essendon Airport to get there, and you won't be able to fly through the airspace of another airport to get to the airport. So that's obviously something they're going to have to take into consideration. But I know that, as I said before, you're a man who loves his e-bikes and e-scooters, and you write about them often in the paper. What did you see at CES? Because I kind of think of this as a relatively mature technology now. Where's
Mm,
it going
mm.
next? Should we be expecting?
Yeah, I mean, it was all just refinements again. So, seeing bikes that were absolutely, I do have an e-bike that I own myself. I picked up an e-bike today that had like twice the range, twice the speed, and it was half the weight of my current e-bike.
Oh,
So
nice. Yeah.
yeah, to be able to see that kind of stuff, like that's when I think we'll really see a lot of e-bikes out on the road. There still is a little bit of I can imagine if you lived in an apartment, trying to drag an e-bike up the stairs would be something you would not want to do. So I can see that there are still a lot of barriers to entry when e-bikes are quite heavy, quite bulky, and still quite expensive, I would say. So I don't know, just seeing some of those battery prices coming down as well gives me hope. And also, actually, the I'm with you being cynical about Uber Elevate, but Uber Jump is coming to Australia in the next couple of months. So, and that is their
I've lost track
e-bike.
of my Ubers. Yeah, what's that? E-bikes.
Yeah,
Okay.
e-bike sharing service. And so yeah, again, they were very coy about kind of what cities they'd signed on, but they promised that they've signed on some cities, and I even asked them about, well, Melburnians tend to, when they see a dockless bike share, they tend to throw them in the river or up a tree. Like, what are you going to do about that? So they think that they've got a compelling enough product that hopefully that won't happen.
And you'll be able to pick up a cheap e-bike from the bottom of the Yarra.
Absolutely. Well, they're very, very heavy. So yeah, if you are planning on throwing one into the Yarra, you might want to start working out now.
Well, that just about wraps it up for our first episode of Vertical Hold for 2020, straight from CES. Peter, thanks so much for joining us for the show.
Oh, thank you, Adam.
And of course, thanks everyone for coming back and joining us. Sorry, we're a little bit late this week with the time zone difference, but we really appreciate Peter getting this done before he collapses onto a plane to come home. Hopefully, keep listening throughout the year. We really appreciate your reviews, your feedbacks, your shout outs, and don't you go change it. Vertical Hold is proudly sponsored by Casa Systems, taking Australian technology to the global market. Are they still throwing around the word teledildonics, or have they moved on from that?
I've never heard that word before in my life.